Now, looking at it from that perspective, how do you define your own identity today? I mean, what would you like to say even about that? Then we are moving into languages now because all these, of course, they are tying together.
That it's a tricky question, I'll tell you. And I like the question. I'm searching my thoughts. How do I really define myself? I guess most often than not, I would refer to myself, I would label myself as a Caribbean woman. Now, but what does that mean to somebody who is not from the Caribbean? Um, I think by and large, because we're such small countries in the Caribbean, um, maybe we tend to want to try to feel bigger by associating ourselves with some sort of bigger entity, and that entity would be the Caribbean. Um, to me, then, when I say I'm a Caribbean woman, I recognize the region in which I live because when you go from one island to the next, we're mainly an archipelago of islands, although there are a few countries on the South American continent that identify as Caribbean countries because they have a shoreline with the Caribbean Sea. So it's a geographical area, the Caribbean Sea, the Caribbean Basin. But I think beyond the geography, there is that common history of having all welcomed slaves, that slaves were the ones who built these countries, built the economies of these countries, whether it was under the British colonial rule, the French colonial, the Spanish colonial rule. We had the Dutch colonial rule in the region as well. Um, so I think there's a sense of that common identity of being Caribbean. But what does that mean? For me, it means that we are, and I'm quoting one of my favorite political leaders in the region, who is the Prime Minister of Barbados, Miss Mia Mottley, when she says, F comes before I, family comes before ideology. And she was speaking about political ideology, that we may have different political beliefs or persuasions, but she speaks about this notion of a Caribbean family, and that's how I feel about Caribbean people. I've traveled a lot throughout the Caribbean region. I've lived in other Caribbean countries for longer periods, not just visiting. And there is a sense of community. There's a sense that we share a lot of traits in common. We have a love of music, a love of dance, a love of food. There are different iterations of the same food in different Caribbean countries. We have a particular way that we dance. It's a Caribbean rhythm. And again, this crosses over whether it's the French Caribbean, Spanish Caribbean, British Caribbean. There is just some sense of community in this region. I like to say that the whole Caribbean is my playground. I can go anywhere in the Caribbean and feel at home. Once I step out of the Caribbean, then I feel like I'm in a foreign country. Then I feel like I am the foreigner, I am the migrant, I am in some cases, I'm the intruder, I'm the odd one out once I step out of the physical Caribbean space. But to give you a name or a description or a label of Caribbean would be difficult. It's quite difficult.
Thank you for your explanation. That is very important. In fact, that is what we want to hear. We want to hear how you see it. The way you see it, that is good enough. That is what it is. There is no way that everyone must abide by. There are the ways upon which we see things, and that is what makes it even more beautiful. And again, we are talking of multiculturality, multi-ethnicity, plural society, which is the way the world is today. Even though there are some people, both here in Europe and in some other parts of the world, in the United States, who think that there is a pure race, there is a pure group of people where it is difficult to even find this pure group of people, and certainly not in 2022. We are not going to be able to recreate that world again. Maybe one time in the distant past, there were very few people who probably have one culture among them. Probably it will never happen again. And you remember, for example, the movement of Marcus Garvey, and many after that also, this idea of Africa unite and maybe Africans returning back to the base, no?
Mm-hmm.
Where we are going to have to understand that, and we're going to understand it from a different light now. That probably these more than 500 million Africans in the diaspora are probably not really going to return to stay in Africa. Some of them might return, which is a question of choice. It needs to be a choice. Why we might not necessarily be talking of physical return to stay in Africa, we can connect, we can collaborate, we can work together, we can understand our history, but we must give our children the liberty to choose, where do you want to stay? How do you see yourself? So this is where I come to the question of identity. This is where I really find it very interesting. If you look at the African diaspora very critically, you see that the question of identity is so important. It's an argument that is so critical for all of us. Whether you are in the first generation, in the second generation, in the fifth or the sixth generation, it's always an issue that must come out. Except maybe you are just denying it. If you understand it, then it's always going to come. And sometimes we are all going to respond to it differently. Now, that connects all to actually the way I got the word connection is because of your language. Because before we started to record just now, you didn't make mention of language as a connection or as a connective factor, or maybe connecting people. So this is where I'm going in here now. Let me understand how you get into languages and language as a connective factor.
This was a new world that was open to me in high school when I started learning Spanish and French. And I think I just hid in that world because it was a world that provided comfort to me, and a great escape. But it also became my superpower in the sense that that's the only thing I was good at in high school. So I pretty much just grasped that. I latched onto it and I held on to it because that was like my life buoy, my life jacket. That's what kept me afloat in the sea of trouble. And I can look back now and think, well, some people say, well, I had no choice. I couldn't choose any of the subjects. In our British colonial system, you have to choose the subjects that you want to write for your O-level exam and then your A-level exam. So I didn't have a choice. That was my choice. That was all I was good at. But moving on from there, I quickly was able to see and experience how, without even leaving my country, because I didn't have my parents, didn't have the financial means after the divorce um, to allow me to participate in sort of travel linguistic programs and that kind of thing. Um, but without even leaving my country, I was able to host French students from neighboring islands of Martinique and Guadeloupe who would come to Trinidad and Tobago. Every year there was this student exchange program through the Alliance Française. And so through hosting those students at home for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I was exposed to their language. And these connections, these very real connections, again, further opened up my realm of possibilities. I started to see and to understand that speaking foreign languages could be my way out of trouble. Could be my career. And so I really pursued foreign languages with all my heart. And in the end, I succeeded brilliantly, I would say, in foreign languages.